What would you do if the person you built an empire with decided to tear you down in front of the entire world? For Emily Hayes, this wasn't a hypothetical question. She stood backstage listening to her husband, the powerful James Hayes, on the grand stage of their own charity gala. He was supposed to be thanking donors. Instead, he was holding another woman's hand, a woman half his age, and preparing to deliver the ultimate public humiliation. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with champagne and scandal. Thousands of eyes were on him, but they had no idea the real show was about to begin. Because Emily wasn't there to cry. She was there to collect. And she was wearing her secret weapon, a gown made of pure diamonds and devastating truth. The Hayes name was etched in gold on the tallest skyscraper in the city. Hayes Global was a titan of industry, a sprawling empire of logistics, technology, and real estate. To the public, James Hayes was the charismatic genius who had built it from the ground up. He was the face on magazine covers, the voice in boardrooms, the man who commanded respect with a steely gaze and a smile that could disarm presidents. But behind every great man, the old saying goes, is a great woman. In this case, the woman wasn't behind him. She was the very architect of the scaffolding that held his empire aloft. Emily Hayes, his wife of 22 years, was the strategist, the analyst, the quiet force who saw trends before they formed and threats before they materialized. She had met James when he had nothing but a struggling shipping company and a mountain of debt. It was her mind for logistics, her quiet negotiations, and the seed money from her late father's trust that had transformed his fledgling business into a global behemoth. She never wanted the spotlight. She preferred the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly balanced ledger, the thrill of a hostile takeover planned and executed from the shadows of her sprawling home office. James, however, thrived on adoration. He craved the applause, the flash of cameras, the sycophantic laughter of his subordinates. In the beginning, their dynamic worked. He was the sun, and she was the gravity that kept his planets in orbit. But over the last 5 years, the balance had shifted. James's craving for applause had morphed into a desperate need for validation. He began to resent the fact that his most successful ventures were born from her strategies. He'd present her ideas as his own in the boardroom, then return home and criticize her for being too involved, too cold, too corporate. He started to believe his own press, forgetting the woman who had ghost-written the script of his success. The distance between them grew from a crack to a chasm. He spent more nights working late, a tired euphemism that fooled no one, least of all Emily. She saw the credit card statements, dinners at restaurants she'd never been to, jewelry from Cartier. She'd never receive weekend trips to private islands she'd never see. The other woman was Chloe Summers, a 24-year-old aspiring actress who had found her most lucrative role yet as James Hayes's mistress. She was everything Emily was not: bubbly, vapid, and publicly adoring. She hung on his every word, validating the fragile ego of a man who had everything but couldn't stand the fact that he hadn't earned it alone. Emily could have fought him, screamed thrown porcelain vases against the marble walls of their penthouse. But that wasn't her way. Emotion was a liability in business and in war, and this was rapidly becoming both. Instead, she observed. She documented. She planned. While James was wining and dining, Chloe Emily was having quiet meetings with Marcus Thorne, her fiercely loyal and razor-sharp attorney. She was tracing the flow of money, the illegal transfers from corporate accounts, to Chloe's personal slush fund. She was moving her own assets, fortifying her position, and preparing for a battle James didn't even know was coming. The catalyst was the 20th Annual Hayes Foundation Charity Gala, the pinnacle of the city's social calendar. It was an event Emily had founded and meticulously planned every year. This year, however, James had taken over, claiming she needed to rest. He told her he was handling everything. Emily knew exactly what that meant. It was a power play, a public demotion. A week before the gala, her private investigator delivered a packet of information that turned her blood to ice. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. James, advised by a new sycophantic board he had installed, was planning a corporate restructuring. The plan was to create a new parent company, transfer Hayes Global's most valuable assets to it, and install himself as the untouchable chairman. He had found a loophole in their prenuptial agreement that would, he believed, leave Emily with a handsome but ultimately powerless severance. He was cutting her out, not just from his life, but from the empire she had built. The gala was his stage. He planned to announce the new direction for the company, and with Chloe on his arm, subtly introduce her as the new woman in his life, painting Emily as the estranged, bitter wife who was being left behind. He wanted to humiliate her so thoroughly that she would have no choice but to take his insulting offer and disappear. That evening, as the sun set over the city, casting long shadows from the Hayes Tower, Emily stood in her dressing room. It was a space larger than most apartments, filled with couture gowns and priceless jewelry, all of which felt like props in a life that was no longer her own. Her loyal assistant Isabel was nervously adjusting the train of a simple, elegant navy gown. "Are you sure about this, Emily?" Isabel asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Just letting him go out there. He has her with him." Emily looked at her own reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was not the bright-eyed girl who had fallen for a charismatic dreamer. This woman's eyes were like polished steel. There were faint lines of exhaustion around them, but they held a fire that had been dormant for too long. "He's counting on me to hide, to cry, or to make a scene," Emily said, her voice calm and even. "He's expecting a wife. He's not prepared for a CEO." She turned away from the navy dress. "Isabel, not that one. Bring me the Aurora." Isabel's eyes widened. "The Aurora. But that's not. It's a collector's piece. It's a statement." "Exactly," Emily said, a slow, dangerous smile touching her lips for the first time in months. "Every part of tonight is a statement." The Aurora wasn't just a dress. It was a masterpiece designed by the reclusive couturier Serafina, a one-of-a-kind creation commissioned by Emily herself a year prior. The gown was crafted from a liquid silver fabric that seemed to pour over the body, but its true magnificence came from the thousands of ethically sourced diamonds that were hand-stitched into the bodice and cascaded down the skirt. They weren't just any diamonds. They were from the Starfall mine in Botswana, a mine James had tried and failed to acquire 2 years ago. What he never knew was that the holding company that outbid him, Ethelred Holdings, was secretly controlled by Emily through a blind trust her father had left her. The mine and its breathtaking output was hers. The dress was more than an adornment. It was a symbol of her hidden power, a testament to all the secrets she kept. As she slipped into the gown, the cool weight of it felt like armor. Each diamond was a silent victory, a piece of the empire he thought was his, but that she secretly owned. Downstairs, the limousine was waiting. The gala had already begun. James would be on stage soon. And Emily Hayes, dressed in the spoils of a war he didn't know he was losing, was ready to make her entrance. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of manufactured elegance. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, dripped light onto 1,000 of the city's most influential figures. The air hummed with polite conversation, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the subtle cutthroat dance of social maneuvering. At the center of this universe, holding court like a modern-day king, was James Hayes. He was in his element. Dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, he moved through the crowd with an easy confidence that bordered on arrogance. He shook hands with senators, clapped bankers on the back, and kissed the cheeks of society doyens, all while keeping a proprietary hand on the small of Chloe Summers's back. Chloe was a vision in crimson, a stark, loud contrast to the ballroom's sophisticated palette. Her dress was daringly low-cut, her laughter a little too loud, her eyes scanning the room, not with the poise of an invited guest, but with the triumphant glee of a conqueror. She was a declaration of war, and everyone in the room knew it. Whispers followed them like the train of her gown. "Is that Chloe Summers?" one woman murmured behind her fan to another. "I thought she was just a rumor." "James doesn't do rumors, darling," her companion replied, taking a slow sip of champagne. "He does public statements. And where, pray tell, is Emily?" The question hung in the air at every table. Emily's absence was a gaping hole in the fabric of the evening. She was the heart of this event. Her grace and intelligence had always been its guiding force. Without her, the gala felt hollow, like a beautiful body without a soul. James reveled in her absence. It was part of his plan. He wanted people to wonder, to speculate. He wanted them to see him with the young, vibrant Chloe, and conclude that Emily was at home, a forgotten relic of the past. He made his way to the head table, where several key members of the Hayes Global Board were seated. Among them was Alistair Finch, a silver-haired old-money titan who had been on the board since its inception. Alistair had been a friend of Emily's father, and had always held a deep, quiet respect for her business acumen. "James," Alistair greeted him, his eyes coolly appraising Chloe. "A wonderful evening, though we are all missing our true hostess." James's smile was tight. Emily wasn't feeling up to it, a bit under the weather. "But she sends her best." He gestured grandly to Chloe. "Alistair, I'd like you to meet Chloe Summers. Chloe is a very dear friend. She's been a great source of inspiration for me lately." Chloe offered a simpering smile. "Such a pleasure, Mr. Finch. I've heard so much about you. James says you're an absolute legend." Alistair's expression remained unchanged. He gave Chloe a nod so brief it was almost an insult. "Miss Summers," he said, then turned his attention back to his plate, a clear and deliberate dismissal. The snub was not lost on James. His jaw clenched. Alistair was a relic of the old guard, loyal to Emily. He would be the first to go after the restructuring. The orchestra began its final flourish before the speeches. James's assistant, a nervous young man named Peterson, scurried to his side. "Sir, it's time. We're ready for you on stage." "Excellent," James said, draining his champagne glass. He turned to Chloe, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This is it. Get ready for your debut, my dear. After tonight, everyone will know who you are." Chloe's eyes glittered with excitement. This was everything she had ever dreamed of. The money, the status, the public adoration, it was all finally hers. She squeezed James's hand, her painted nails digging slightly into his skin. I'm ready, James. I won't let you down. James walked towards the stage, the spotlight finding him and following him like a loyal pet. The room fell silent. He tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the vast space. Friends, partners, colleagues. He began, his voice smooth and commanding. Welcome. 20 years we have hosted this gala, and every year we break records, raising millions for children's literacy programs. It is a testament to the power and generosity of everyone in this room. He paused, letting the polite applause wash over him. But traditions, as wonderful as they are, must sometimes evolve. Greatness is not achieved by standing still. It is achieved by embracing the future, by having the courage to shed the old and welcome the new. A nervous energy rippled through the audience. This was not the standard feel-good charity speech. This felt different. It felt personal. Alistair Finch leaned forward, his brow furrowed in suspicion. James's eyes scanned the room, a predator searching for his prey. But Emily was nowhere to be seen. Perfect. He had the stage all to himself. Hayes Global is on the cusp of a new era. He continued, his voice rising with theatrical passion. An era of bold new leadership, of fresh ideas, of vitality. We are restructuring, streamlining, and positioning ourselves to dominate the next century. And this new direction for the company is mirrored in my own life. He took a deep breath, preparing for the kill shot. For too long, I have been held back by, let's call it, a difference in vision, a reluctance to embrace the future. But no more. He turned his gaze towards the head table, directly at Chloe. A second spotlight, perfectly timed, illuminated her. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. I have found a new inspiration. A muse, James declared, his voice ringing with false emotion. Someone who shares my vision for the future, who embodies the youth energy and passion that will drive us forward. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the future. Chloe Summers. He extended his hand, and Chloe, beaming under the spotlight, practically floated towards the stage, her red dress a slash of scarlet against the dark backdrop. The room was in a state of stunned, horrified silence. This was beyond an affair. It was a public execution. He was divorcing his wife on a charity gala stage in front of everyone who mattered. James took Chloe's hand and held it high as if they had just won a championship. Together, he announced, we will be unstoppable. He leaned in to kiss her, a calculated act of dominance for the cameras that were now flashing manically. But just as his lips were about to touch hers, a collective gasp louder and more profound than any before swept through the ballroom. It started at the back of the room and rolled forward like a wave. The grand entrance doors had swung open, and framed in the doorway, standing in a pool of ethereal light, was a figure that made every other person in the room fade to black and white. It was Emily. The silence in the plaza's grand ballroom was no longer polite. It was a heavy, suffocating thing, a physical presence that pressed in on everyone. James and Chloe stood frozen on the stage, their triumphant pose now looking awkward and grotesque. All the energy, all the focus that James had so carefully curated for himself had been stolen in an instant. Emily didn't walk. She progressed. She moved with the unhurried, deliberate grace of a queen entering her court. The gown, the aurora, was alive. It caught the light from the chandeliers and shattered it into a million tiny, brilliant pieces, creating a shimmering aura around her. With every step, the diamonds whispered against the silver fabric, a sound more commanding than any shout. The crowd parted for her, as if by instinct. People who had been whispering about her moments before now stood in mute awe. She was not the downtrodden, humiliated wife they had imagined. She was a celestial event, a force of nature that had just swept into the room. James's face went through a rapid series of transformations. First, utter shock. He had been so certain she wouldn't come. Then confusion. The dress. He had never seen it before. It was magnificent, impossibly so. Where had it come from? And finally, a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. She was upstaging him, at his moment. She was ruining his perfectly orchestrated triumph. Chloe, on the other hand, just looked small. Her bright red dress suddenly seemed cheap and garish next to the otherworldly brilliance of Emily's gown. Her confident smile had evaporated, replaced by a look of bewildered panic. She looked at James for guidance, but his eyes were locked on his wife, his jaw set like granite. Emily's gaze swept over the crowd, coolly acknowledging a few familiar faces with the barest hint of a nod. Her expression was serene, unreadable. She wasn't looking at James. Not yet. She was taking possession of the room, reminding every single person present who the true master of this universe was. Her silent procession towards the stage was the most powerful speech the room had ever witnessed. As she reached the foot of the stage, she finally lifted her eyes to meet James's. There was no pain in her gaze, no anger. There was something far more terrifying pity. "James," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it was amplified by the microphone he had left on, and it carried to every corner of the silent hall. It was calm, clear, and laced with an authority he hadn't heard in years. "You seem to have gotten ahead of yourself. The main announcements for the evening haven't been made yet." James found his voice sputtering with rage. "Emily, what is the meaning of this? You were supposed to be. You said you were ill." "I was," she replied smoothly, placing one hand on the railing of the stage steps. "I was sick of the lies, sick of the theft, sick of your profound and unending mediocrity. But I'm feeling much better now." A nervous titter went through the crowd. This was better than theatre. She ascended the steps, her diamond-encrusted train whispering behind her. Chloe, seeing her approach, instinctively took a step back, as if Emily were physically radiating a cold she couldn't bear. Emily stopped beside James so close he could see the flawless fire in the diamonds on her bodice. They were worth more than the penthouse he thought they shared. "A new era for Hayes Global, you said," Emily continued, turning to address the audience, effectively dismissing her husband. "I couldn't agree more. Courage to shed the old and welcome the new. An excellent sentiment." She turned her head slightly to look at Chloe, her eyes doing a slow, deliberate scan from the younger woman's overly styled hair down to her designer shoes. "Though I do believe you've misunderstood what the old is that needs shedding." Chloe flushed a deep, mottled red, a mixture of humiliation and fury. "I don't know who you think you are," she began, her voice high and shrill. "Oh, but you do." Emily cut her off, her tone dropping to a glacial calm. "You know exactly who I am. I'm the woman whose corporate accounts you've been using as your personal piggy bank. Let's see. $50,000 for a weekend in St. Bart's, coded as client relations. A 120,000 Patek Philippe watch, listed as executive bonuses. And my personal favorite, a lease on a Park Avenue apartment filed under satellite office expansion. Very creative." Chloe's face went white. The crowd gasped. This wasn't just an affair. It was a criminal accusation. James grabbed Emily's arm. "That's enough," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper, meant only for her. "You're making a fool of yourself." Emily looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up to his face. "Take your hand off me, James," she said, each word a perfectly enunciated threat. "Or the next thing I discuss will be the Cayman Islands accounts and the fraudulent revenue reports from the last 2 quarters. James snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. The blood drained from his face. How? How could she possibly know about that? He had buried that so deep used shell corporations, so complex. Not even the best forensic accountants could trace them. He looked out at the sea of faces, his board members, his investors, his rivals all staring at him, their expressions shifting from shock to suspicion. The narrative he had so carefully crafted was shattering around him. He was no longer the king on stage. He was a cornered animal. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily announced, her voice ringing with newfound power as she took control of the microphone James had abandoned. "My husband is right. Tonight is about the future. It's about a necessary and long overdue restructuring, which is why I took the liberty of filing a motion this afternoon." She reached into a small diamond-studded clutch that had been almost invisible against her gown. She pulled out a single folded document. "This gala is no longer just a charity event," she declared, her eyes finding Alistair Finch in the crowd and giving him a knowing look. "As of 2 hours ago, with the support of 52% of the voting shares of Hayes Global, this has been officially declared an emergency shareholders' meeting." The room erupted in a roar of astonished murmurs. 52%. How was that possible? James only controlled 45%. Emily held 25%. That only made 70%. Who held the other 30%? James had always assumed they were scattered among passive institutional investors. Emily smiled, a true, brilliant smile that lit up her face. "James, you always were so careless with the details. You forgot about Ethelred Holdings, the firm that bought up that 30% block over the last 5 years. You even tried to buy them out once, remember? You dismissed their leadership as provincial and unsophisticated." She paused for dramatic effect. "It's a pity you never asked who was on their board of directors. I am the chairwoman." James stared at her, his mind reeling, desperately trying to process the information. Ethelred, the mining company, the one that outbid him. It was her. It had been her all along. The quiet dinners, the charity trips she took without him, it was all a lie. She hadn't been retreating. She had been building a second empire right under his nose. The humiliation he had planned for her was a child's prank compared to the strategic demolition she was now executing upon him. He stood on the stage, stripped bare, in front of the entire world, not by a scorned wife, but by a superior business opponent who had just checkmated him in the most public way imaginable. "So yes," Emily said, her voice cool and decisive. "Let's talk about shedding the old. Let's talk about the future of Hayes Global." Her gaze swept past James and Chloe, dismissing them as irrelevant. She was speaking to her board, her investors, her company. "The first order of business, a vote of no confidence in our current CEO, Mr. James Hayes." The words "vote of no confidence" hung in the air, charged and dangerous. For a moment, the only sound was the frantic clicking of cameras as press photographers, who had been invited to capture a society event, realized they were now documenting the corporate coup of the decade. James stood as if turned to stone, his mind a maelstrom of denial and rage. This couldn't be happening. He was James Hayes. He built this company. The shares, the board, they were his. The idea that Emily, quiet, predictable Emily, could orchestrate something of this magnitude was so preposterous it felt like a hallucination, but the look on Alistair Finch's face told him it was very real. The old man was not shocked. He was watching Emily with a look of profound, undisguised admiration. He rose slowly from his seat, his commanding presence drawing the attention of everyone at the head table. As a senior board member and a representative of my own family's considerable share block, Alistair announced, his voice booming through the ballroom, I second the motion. Another board member, a shrewd woman named Evelyn Reed, who had long suspected James of cooking the books, stood up. I also second the motion. One by one, the people James had considered his allies, or at least his pawns, began to see the new direction the wind was blowing. They saw Emily not just in a stunning gown, but clad in the unassailable armor of a majority shareholder. They saw the hard evidence of her claims in the panicked sweat beading on James's brow. Loyalty in their world was a currency, and James's had just been declared worthless. This is absurd, James finally roared, finding his voice. He lunged for the microphone, but Emily simply took a step to the side, holding it out of his reach. He looked like a clumsy bear trying to snatch a butterfly. Security, he bellowed, his face turning a blotchy purple. Get her off the stage. Two burly men in black suits at the side of the stage looked at each other, then at Emily, then back at James. They didn't move. They, like everyone else, were waiting to see who was actually in charge. Emily gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. That won't be necessary. James, the vote is already a formality. The proxies were filed this afternoon. The motion passes. You are effective immediately removed as CEO and chairman of the board of Hayes Global. She turned to the stunned crowd. I have here, she said, holding up a sleek tablet that Isabel, her assistant, had just discreetly handed to her from the wings of the stage, a preliminary report from the forensic accounting team I hired 3 months ago. It details the misappropriation of over $90 million in corporate funds. Some of it went to fund a lavish lifestyle for Miss Summers. She flicked her eyes towards Chloe, who looked as if she might faint. But the vast majority went into a series of offshore accounts under the name Prometheus Holdings. A little on the nose for you, James, don't you think? The mention of Prometheus Holdings was the final nail in the coffin. It was his secret escape fund, the one he planned to flee with after gutting the company. She knew everything. Every dirty deal, every secret account, every lie he had ever told. The intricate web of deceit he thought made him a genius now felt like a noose tightening around his neck. Chloe, finally grasping the totality of her situation, began to back away. Her dreams of becoming the next Mrs. Hayes, of a life of endless luxury, had evaporated. She was now implicated in a multi-million-dollar fraud. Her association with James had turned from a winning lottery ticket into a life-ruining liability. With a small, pathetic whimper, she turned and fled, pushing her way off the stage and disappearing into the shocked crowd. No one tried to stop her. She was a footnote in a much larger story. James watched her go, his last prop, his symbol of a vibrant future abandoning him on the sinking ship. He was alone, exposed under the harsh glare of the spotlights that he had once so desperately craved. He turned back to Emily, his rage replaced by a creeping, desperate dread. Emily, please, he whispered, the sound pathetic even to his own ears. We can talk about this. In private. Don't do this. Emily looked at him, and for the first time she allowed a flicker of her own long-buried pain to show in her eyes. In private, you wanted this to be public, James. You wanted to destroy me in front of all these people. You chose the stage. The only thing you miscalculated was who was directing the play. She turned back to the audience, her composure absolute once more. The board will convene tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to formally appoint an interim CEO while we conduct a full audit and cooperate with the relevant authorities. A press release is being sent out as we speak." She paused, letting the finality of her words settle. "Thank you all for coming tonight. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. And do be generous. The Children's Literacy Foundation is a cause I still believe in, even if its former patron is a fraud and a thief." With that, she turned and walked not off the stage, but towards the back where a new set of doors led to a private reception area she had prepared. Alistair Finch and the other loyal board members immediately began to move, following her. The power in the room had shifted, coalescing around a new center of gravity. James was left alone on the brightly lit stage. The whispers from the crowd were now a roaring torrent of judgment. The cameras flashed, capturing his utter and complete ruin. The man who had entered the ballroom a king was now just a common criminal. A fool who had handed his executioner the axe and pointed to his own neck. He sank to his knees on the stage, the great James Hayes, finally understanding that the empire was never truly his. He had only been its caretaker, and the Queen had just come home. The private lounge behind the stage was an oasis of calm amidst the storm raging in the ballroom. Here the decor was muted, the lighting soft. A bottle of vintage champagne sat chilling in a silver bucket, and a tray of untouched hors d'oeuvres rested on a mahogany table. This room had been prepared for a victory celebration. Emily had left nothing to chance. Alistair Finch entered first, followed by Evelyn Reed and 2 other board members who had sided with her. They were all buzzing with a mixture of adrenaline and awe. "Emily, that was a masterpiece," Alistair said, breaking the silence. "Sun Tzu would have been taking notes." Evelyn Reed shook her head in disbelief. "Ethelred Holdings, all this time. You absolute genius." Emily allowed herself a small, weary smile. She walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, which offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline dominated by the Hayes Tower. "He became complacent," she said, her voice quiet. "He confused my silence for submission. It's a common mistake arrogant men make." Isabel Rossi, her loyal assistant, came in and gently draped a cashmere shawl over Emily's shoulders, covering the brilliant diamonds. "The press is in a frenzy," Isabel reported. "They're calling it the Gala Coup. Chloe Summers was seen getting into a taxi, sobbing. And James, he's still out there. Security is trying to escort him out a side door, but he's refusing to move." Emily nodded. "Let him have his moment of public grief. He orchestrated it, after all." She turned from the window to face her allies. "Alistair, Evelyn, thank you. Your support was crucial." "Support, my dear. You held all the cards," Alistair chuckled. "We just had the good sense to bet on the winning hand. The interim CEO. I assume you have someone in mind." Emily looked at him, her expression serious. "I do. Me." There was a beat of silence, and then Alistair broke into a broad smile. "Of course. There is no one else who could possibly right this ship. The board will approve it unanimously." "Good," Emily said. "My first order of business will be transparency. We release everything. We show the shareholders and the public exactly how deep James's rot went. We take the hit, we clean house, and we rebuild on a foundation of integrity. Hayes Global was my life's work. I will not let his corruption be its legacy." Just then the door to the lounge creaked open. It was Marcus Thorne, Emily's lawyer. He was a tall, imposing man, with a mind like a steel trap. He held a leather briefcase in his hand. "It's done." Marcus said, his voice grim but satisfied. "I've spoken with the DA's office. They've been monitoring the situation based on the whistleblower report we filed last week. They have enough to issue a warrant. They're on their way to pick up Mr. Hayes now." The finality of it all settled in the room. This wasn't just a corporate ousting. It was a criminal matter. James wouldn't just lose his company. He would lose his freedom. Emily felt a pang, not of pity, but of a strange, hollow sadness for the man he once was, for the partnership they once had. It was a phantom limb, an ache from something long since amputated. She quickly pushed the feeling aside. Sentimentality was a luxury she couldn't afford. "And the other matter?" she asked Marcus. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a slim manila folder. He slid it across the table to her. "Ready to be served. All we need is his signature or his refusal to sign." Inside the folder were divorce papers. Emily took the folder. "I'll deliver it myself," she said. Alistair looked concerned. "Emily, are you sure you don't need to face him again?" "Yes, I do," she replied, her voice firm. "This was never just about the company. This was about my life. I need to close this chapter myself, not with lawyers or proxies, but face to face." She straightened her shoulders, the cashmere shawl doing little to hide the steely resolve in her posture. "Marcus, please wait for me by the west exit. Isabel, stay with our guests. I won't be long." She walked out of the lounge, the divorce papers held firmly in her hand. She moved back towards the now chaotic stage area. The crowd was dispersing, buzzing with the news. She saw the flashing red and blue lights of police cars through the main doors of the hotel. She found James in a small anteroom off the main stage, the place where he had been waiting for his grand entrance earlier in the evening. He was slumped in a velvet armchair, his tuxedo disheveled, his face pale and slack. The roaring lion she had just dethroned now looked like a broken, pathetic old man. 2 hotel security guards stood awkwardly by the door. He looked up as she entered, and his eyes, once so full of fire and arrogance, were now hollowed out by despair. "You," he croaked, his voice raspy. "Me," she confirmed, her tone devoid of emotion. She walked over and placed the folder on the small table beside him. "The lawyers call this irreconcilable differences. I call it grand larceny and felony fraud. I expect your full cooperation. Given your impending legal troubles, a messy divorce will be the least of your concerns." He stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. "Everything," he whispered. "You're taking everything." Emily looked at him, truly looked at him for the last time. "You seem to be under a misapprehension, James. I'm not taking anything from you. I am simply taking back what was always mine. The company was built on my strategies and my father's money. This building, the penthouse, the jet, they are all assets of a corporation you no longer control. The only thing you ever truly built on your own was this mountain of lies. And now you get to live in its rubble." He finally broke the last vestiges of his pride crumbling. Sobs racked his body, pathetic, gasping sounds. "Why, Emily? After all these years, why couldn't you just let me have this? Why did you have to destroy me?" Her expression hardened. "Destroy you, James. You were a parasite killing its host. I didn't destroy you. I simply performed an excision. I cut out the cancer so that Hayes Global and I could finally heal." She turned to leave her back straight, her steps sure. She didn't look back. As she walked away, she heard the firm official voices of police detectives entering the room. The chapter was closed. The days that followed the gala coup were a whirlwind of controlled chaos orchestrated with precision by Emily. While the media feasted on the salacious details of James's downfall, his perp walk out of the Plaza Chloe Summers' tearful and legally useless press conference, disavowing all knowledge of his crimes. The sordid details of his spending Emily was already deep in the work of rebuilding. She was unanimously confirmed as the new CEO of Hayes Global. Her first act was to hold an all-hands meeting broadcast to every employee worldwide. Standing not on a stage but on the floor of the main trading room in the Hayes Tower, she was direct and unflinching. She laid out the scale of James's fraud, acknowledging the damage it had done to their reputation and their finances. She didn't make excuses. She made promises. The era of ego is over, she told them, her voice resonating with an authenticity the company hadn't heard in years. The era of integrity has begun. We will be transparent, we will be accountable, and we will work twice as hard to earn back the trust we have lost. Your jobs are secure. Your future is here. Hayes Global is not one man, it is all of us, and I am proud to lead you. The speech was a masterstroke. It quelled panic-inspired loyalty and signaled to the market that the company was in steady, capable hands. The stock, which had plummeted in the immediate aftermath of the news, began to stabilize and then slowly, surely, climb back up. The legal fallout for James was swift and brutal. Faced with a mountain of irrefutable evidence compiled by Emily's team, he had no choice but to plead guilty. The judge, citing the egregious breach of fiduciary duty and the sheer scale of the theft, sentenced him to 15 years in a federal correctional facility. His assets were frozen, and what little he had in his own name was seized to pay a fraction of the restitution fines. The man who once commanded a billion-dollar empire was left with nothing but a prison jumpsuit and the bitter taste of regret. Chloe Summers faded back into the obscurity from which she came. Implicated in the scandal, but ultimately deemed more of a pawn than a player, she avoided jail time in exchange for her testimony against James. The last anyone heard, she was working as a hostess at a mid-range restaurant in Los Angeles, her dreams of fame and fortune reduced to seating dinner reservations. Emily, meanwhile, was thriving. It was as if a great weight had been lifted from her. Freed from the emotional labor of managing James's ego, she poured all her formidable energy into the company she loved. She promoted talented people James had overlooked, scrapped his vanity projects, and invested heavily in the innovative tech divisions he had starved of funding. She worked tirelessly, but it was a joyful, energizing work, not the draining, soul-crushing effort of her past life. Her divorce from James was finalized with quiet efficiency. He signed the papers from his holding cell, a broken man with no leverage left to fight. Emily legally reclaimed her maiden name, becoming Emily Sterling. It felt right. She was no longer an extension of the Hayes name. She was her own person, forged in steel and polished by fire. Alistair Finch became her most trusted advisor on the board, a source of wisdom and unwavering support. "I knew your father well," he told her one afternoon over lunch in the executive dining room. "He always said you were the brilliant one. He would be immeasurably proud of the woman you've become, Emily." Coming from the reserved and stoic Alistair, it was the highest praise imaginable, and it moved Emily more than any public accolade. She had not only reclaimed her company, she had honored her father's legacy, and more importantly, forged her own. The Aurora gown was carefully cleaned and put into archival storage. It had served its purpose. It was a beautiful piece of armor, but she no longer needed it. Her power now was not something she had to wear. It was something she simply was. It was in her voice as she commanded a boardroom in her mind, as she mapped out a 5-year growth strategy. and in her step as she walked through the halls of her company. She had been underestimated, betrayed, and publicly targeted for humiliation. They had all mistaken her quiet competence for weakness. They had never imagined that beneath the placid surface of the dutiful wife lay the mind of a brilliant strategist and the heart of a warrior. They had wanted to write her out of the story, but they had only succeeded in giving her the pen to write a new triumphant ending for herself. 6 months after the gala, the Hayes Tower was officially renamed the Sterling Tower. The gold lettering that had once spelled out James's name was carefully removed, replaced by the clean, elegant lines of Emily's. The change was more than symbolic. It was a declaration. A new era had truly begun. Emily stood in her office, which occupied the entire top floor. It was the same space James had once used, but she had redecorated it entirely. The heavy dark wood and ostentatious furniture were gone, replaced with clean lines, modern art, and an abundance of natural light. It was a space for work and clarity, not for ego and posturing. Her schedule was packed. A meeting with the head of R&D about a breakthrough in sustainable logistics, a call with the German finance minister, a final review of the quarterly earnings report, which was projected to be the best in the company's history. She was in her element, thriving on the challenges and the responsibility. Her phone chimed. It was a message from Isabel. "He's here." Emily took a deep breath and smoothed down her impeccably tailored dress. "Send him in." A moment later, the door opened and Marcus Thorne entered, followed by a man Emily hadn't seen in person since that fateful night. It was James's son from his first marriage, a quiet, serious man named Daniel Hayes. He had always been estranged from his father, put off by his bombastic personality and blatant infidelity. Emily, however, had always maintained a cordial if distant relationship with him. "Daniel," she said, coming around her desk to greet him. "Thank you for coming." "Emily," he said, shaking her hand. He looked older, worn down by the public shame of his father's actions. "Or should I be calling you Ms. Sterling now?" "Emily is fine," she said with a warm smile. "Please sit." They sat in the comfortable chairs by the window, the city sprawling beneath them. I just wanted to come here and say it in person." Daniel began, struggling to find the words. "What my father did to you, to the company, it was unforgivable. I'm so sorry." "That is not your apology to make, Daniel," Emily said gently. "You are not your father." "I know, but the name, it feels tarnished," he admitted. "Which brings me to why I'm here. I run a small non-profit that builds schools in developing countries. It's my life's work. I never took a dime from my father. I wanted to build something on my own. But with his name now associated with, well, everything, fundraising has become impossible. No one wants to be associated with the name Hayes." He looked down at his hands. "I'm going to have to shut it down. The children we were helping, they're going to pay the price for his crimes." Emily listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment, looking out at the city. "Your father's legacy is one of greed and destruction," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "But a name is just a name. It's the actions behind it that give it meaning. You have been doing good, honorable work, Daniel. That work should not be another casualty of his corruption." She swiveled in her chair to face her desk and pressed a button on her intercom. "Isabel, could you bring in the portfolio for the Sterling Foundation, please?" A moment later, Isabel entered and handed Emily a thick binder. Emily opened it and slid it across the table to Daniel. "This is the new philanthropic arm of the company," she explained. "Its primary mission is funding global education and literacy initiatives. I've been looking for a flagship partner, a program with a proven track record, and a leader with integrity. Your non-profit is at the top of my list." Daniel stared at the binder, then back at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. You want to fund us?" "I want to acquire you," Emily corrected him gently. "I want to bring your entire operation under the Sterling Foundation's umbrella. I will give you a 10-year, 8-figure operational budget, a full administrative staff, and the logistical support of a global corporation. You will have a seat on the Foundation's board. All I ask is that you continue to do the wonderful work you've been doing, but on a scale 10 times larger than you ever imagined." Daniel was speechless. Tears welled in his eyes. "Emily, I don't know what to say." "Why?" Emily stood up and walked back to the window, looking down at the Sterling Tower's name gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Because this was never about revenge, Daniel," she said. "Revenge is a barren victory. This was about justice. It was about taking something that had been corrupted and making it clean again. It's about building a better legacy. Your father tried to burn everything to the ground for his own selfish gain. We are going to use the ashes to build something that will last for generations." She turned back to him, a genuine, peaceful smile on her face. "So what do you say, Daniel? Are you ready to help me build the future?" He stood up, his face a mask of profound gratitude, and shook her hand firmly. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I am." As he left her office, Emily remained at the window watching the endless flow of traffic far below. She had been trapped in a gilded cage for years, but she had not let it break her. She had used her time to learn to plan and to grow stronger in secret. And when the moment came, she had not just escaped the cage. She had melted it down and reforged it into a crown. The city stretched out before her, not as a kingdom to be ruled, but as a world of infinite possibility. And for the first time, in a very long time, she was truly free. Emily Sterling's story is a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. It's a testament to the fact that true strength isn't about loud declarations and public displays of ego. It's about meticulous planning, unwavering resolve, and the courage to reclaim what is rightfully yours. She turned her deepest betrayal into her greatest triumph, not through vengeance, but through sheer brilliance. If you were moved by Emily's incredible journey from a gilded cage to the CEO's chair, please let us know in the comments below. What part of her story resonated with you the most? We all face moments where we feel underestimated or overlooked. Her story teaches us to bide our time, gather our strength, and when the moment is right, create our own stage. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in justice and empowerment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories of resilience, strategy, and ultimate victory. Click that bell icon so you never miss a single moment of inspiration. Thank you for watching.